In 2004, WWE ran 3 pay-per-views within 6 weeks. It ended with Vengeance 2004. It was Triple H's attempt to get back to the World Heavyweight Championship after his brutal Hell in a Cell match against Shawn Michaels 4 weeks earlier at Bad Blood. It's time to review Vengeance 2004, and the Podski starts now.
The Podski with John Baker. For over 1 year, the revolutionary force in audio entertainment.
Ooh, yeah!
Brother.
Let me talk to you. Freak out, freak out.
I just had an out-of-body experience.
The insane in the membrane.
Brother.
Yeah. And I'm here for only one reason, and that's to take it to the limit, yeah.
Somebody stop the damn man.
I'm living on the edge.
Who is your daddy?
Hello and welcome to the Podski. I'm your host, Johnny Bakeshow, and ringside with me is Teddy Mongoose. We are capping off our early 2004 pay-per-view series with Vengeance. We have covered Bad Blood and Great American Bash. Vengeance was the third pay-per-view in that 6-week window that WWE ran. Before we dive back into the Raw brand, though, we want to remind you to please continue to support the channel by subscribing. It's the best way to support, and when you do, you get closer to unlocking bonus episodes. The Rick Rude bonus episode is available now, Ravishing Reflections. It's available on the channel. Check that out. It's in the description below. We are currently working on the Eddie Guerrero bonus show that is coming soon, and we have the bonus Scott Hall episode that has just been unlocked. We thank you all for tuning in and subscribing. We greatly appreciate it. But as I said, we are working on the Eddie Guerrero show right now, so be expecting that sometime in July. We're going to push Scott Hall to sometime in August, and we want these career spotlights to be really good for you all. We don't want to just hurry up and get them done and push them out. Like, we want these things to be really good career retrospectives of these guys. We want to give these guys their due. So, Teddy, before we got to get back into this Raw brand, because last week we were in SmackDown, but now we're in a post Bad Blood world, and we're on the fringes of post WrestleMania, but now we're getting into SummerSlam season 2. SummerSlam 04 is coming up very, very soon. So what's going on back here on Raw with Vengeance?
There's a lot going on. And so we're actually going to start here with the day after Bad Blood, the day after the longest blow-off feud to the longest feud that has ever been in wrestling.
My favorite one.
Right. So what we're going to do here is start with the July 14th, 2004 Raw show. Again, this is the night after Bad Blood. Dave Meltzer says from The Observer, what may have been the longest Raw in history took place on June 14th in Dayton. The show had one great angle, a very good main event, and some god-awful stuff in between. Now, before I kick it to you, I do want to say that he's not being facetious in the way that you would say that a 3-hour long Raw now feels like forever. This was literally the longest Raw ever with the overrun and everything else. They end up going about 2 hours and 23 minutes or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick it over to you, John. Give us the show rundown, please.
Yes, the show kicked off with Bischoff telling Kane that he's no longer the number one contender after he lost to Benoit at Bad Blood the night before. Kane gets so upset, he tears up Bischoff's office, and Kane is pissed here, like always. He always seems to be tearing up something backstage.
Absolutely.
JR is in the ring. He introduces Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Triple H here, what a makeup job for this guy. Like, you could tell that he wasn't taking sandpaper, that this was all makeup job here. A busted face and a black eye. Both of them are bandaged up, selling like it was the most brutal match of the career night before, which it really was. It was a brutal Hell in a Cell match. Ross asked them both to shake hands. Michaels extends his. Then Kane comes out. He kicks Shawn in the head, and then Triple H bails. Kane destroys Michaels, Pillmanizes him, and Shawn gets stretchered out of the arena. They do tell us later in the show, though, that Shawn has a crushed larynx. So what a visual this was, man.
Right. And two things to note here. The first is, isn't it good to be on top, to be able to sell these big matches like you were in the war of your life when, you know, there's these under guys that have actual wars that probably feel like garbage that got to go out there the next day. And you know what I'm saying? Like just make it seem like nothing happened. The other thing too, though, is that it really should be said that not enough of that selling happens today where people are in these big time blow-offs or these blood feuds or grudge matches and come out like these guys did.
Right.
You know, black eye, can't really walk and all that stuff. So the selling was great there. Dave Meltzer says in relation to the Michaels write-off that the Michaels angle with Kane on Raw was set up for his absence because his wife is due next month. I believe he's out until SummerSlam and no doubt would face Kane.
Well, that actually makes a lot of sense because I didn't understand why Shawn Michaels kind of just was gone. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Little one on the way.
Triple H then says that he wants a title shot, but Bischoff tells him that there is an unbeaten wrestler and it's Eugene. So they set up the match for next week on Raw.
So this was actually a result of Benoit versus Edge being dropped as the pay-per-view main event. The main reason for this is Triple H was set to film a movie. The movie was delayed in production. So with the Triple H versus Eugene match set, Dave says that Triple H is the only match that makes sense. He thought it would be better to save it for SummerSlam. But in this spot, because of the crunch that they'd be in to build Benoit and Edge, Triple H is the most logical. He also says, quote, Triple H beating Eugene this early is right out of WCW booking. Basically saying, you've got yourself a hot act. Why not feed him to the top guy to have him just eat the pedigree and hit the 1, 2, 3.
The highlight reel, Jericho interviews Eugene and he tries to warn him that Triple H is not a good guy. Triple H then comes out to sweet talk Eugene and he gives him a hat and an autographed photo. Triple H is Eugene's favorite wrestler. This is the reason that they're doing it. The main event is an elimination match between Benoit, Edge, and Jericho. They beat Orton, Flair, and Batista. The match was over 30 minutes long. Dave gave it 3.25 stars. Flair was in the ring more than anyone, and his chest was actually blue and bleeding from the Benoit chops. So Batista is eliminated after he ate all of the finishers by the opponents. He ate a spear from Edge, the diving headbutt from Benoit, and then he hit a lion salt from Jericho right in a row. Jericho is eliminated after Orton hits him with the RKO and Flair gets the pin. Edge is then eliminated after Orton low blows and RKOs him. Flair is eliminated by tapping to the crossface, but Benoit wins the match by tapping Randy Orton with the sharpshooter just after the 34-minute mark. Man.
So interesting thing with this is that Dave says the 6-man tag kept being changed as the match was in the ring. It may have gotten repetitive because they laid out a match for a certain length of time, and as it was going on, the guys got word they had to go longer. The match itself was booked long, but timing of certain segments kept changing as it went on. Usually in WWE, it's the opposite, so people complain that either they don't get their spots in or they didn't have enough time to tell their story. Something that wasn't mentioned on the Raw rundown that I need to get to here. They're doing a Lita pregnancy angle. Dave's words, for credibility's sake, she needs to stop wrestling. Of course, the deal will be the question of, is Matt or Kane the father? They did an insulting segment that brought back WCW flashbacks where Lita took an early pregnancy test and it was positive. She then confided in Keebler that she was pregnant, but wanted it to be a secret, not tell anyone, while it's being broadcast on national television. In particular, she didn't want Matt to know. Wrestling's track record with pregnancy angles is something like 99% horrible, from Terry Runnels' fake miscarriage to Mae Young to Stacy Keibler in WCW, where Vince Russo was going to be the father.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Who booked this, man? Who booked
Right.
this?
Right. You lay it out like that, dude. We have a fake miscarriage. Mae Young gives birth to a hand, and then Stacy Keibler, Vince Russo was going to be the dad.
My God.
Now we have is Lita holding Rosemary's baby? Do you know what I'm
Yes.
do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So to go back to what we talked about at the start of this show ran for 2 hours and 23 minutes, and it provided a learning experience. People are creatures of habit and set aside until about 11:08 to watch wrestling on Monday nights. One would have thought, since the main events traditionally draw the best numbers, lots of people tune in weekly at 11 p.m. because they know that's the climax of the show, and that a long match going over will add to the rating. Dun, dun, dun. Plot twist. So overall, the rating was up from recent weeks at 3.63. It did a 3.42 first hour, 3.79 second hour for 4.18 million viewers. The strange note here is that the main event that went 36 minutes, probably the longest match in Raw history, lost 517,000 viewers from start to finish and ended at a 3.45. It is the exact opposite of what you expect a main event to do, and the rating would have been very slightly higher had it ended at the usual time. Fortunately, the show had an amazing peak with the Triple H Eugene confrontation during the highlight reel, which gained 654,000 viewers, up to a 4.19 rating and 4.7 million viewers.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was so drawn into this Eugene Triple H storyline. I loved it.
I'll tell you what, John, at a time where live time, okay, I was a huge Shawn guy and I was sick of Triple H, right? Like I had enough.
Yeah.
But I did not look back on Eugene fondly for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Rewatching Eugene, the way that they play it up is really fun and funny. B, Triple H is so good here.
Yeah.
He is so good. He makes it, dude. He really does. The way that he sells being Eugene's buddy.
Yes.
And then immediately turn around and be like, this guy's a total loser. We got this. It's excellent stuff, dude. It really is. And so feather in his cap. And there's a couple of things that are in these issues where Dave literally says, like, so is the benefit of working with Triple H. Like if he's in your bag, then you're going to be taken care of. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
I will say that an unsung hero throughout this whole entire Eugene and Triple H storyline is Ric Flair. And we're going to talk about it later, but I had to get that out there because Ric Flair is an unsung hero throughout this entire storyline.
Right. And Evolution's hot here.
Oh, really?
I mean, they're carrying the shows and they did a wonderful job creating a group that really mattered. And you know, hats off. Again, it's good to be king because at that point in time, man, whenever he had the power that he did, he wielded it and used it to his advantage. And, you know, who better than having Flair as your right-hand man? And then it's not like Orton and Batista does. Now, Batista's raw in the ring, but his presence is great.
Yeah.
And Orton is really coming into his own here.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We'll talk about Orton later on.
Okay, so house shows during this week. Eugene is beating Garrison Cade with the stunner. Orton is pinning Edge with his feet on the ropes, even though they advertised Benoit versus Kane. Benoit wrestles Flair to the chagrin of no one in the crowd. Flair is over huge each night, but so was Benoit. Benoit wins each of the house shows on that loop with the crossface, even after Orton and Batista interfere. So that's where we are on the road. Let me now pivot and take us over to business. I don't know how many people this is their favorite segment, but God dang it, do I like to talk WWE business. So the reason that this is important, and this is from the June 28th Observer newsletter, this is the WWE's fiscal year. It just came to an end. And so now they've released all their numbers, and Linda McMahon is out there on the conference call talking to all the shareholders. Okay. So Dave Meltzer reports, even though its popularity is nowhere close to where it once was, World Wrestling Entertainment had what is believed to be its third or fourth most profitable year of any wrestling promotion in history when it closed its books on the 03-04 year on 4/30. For the year, the company grossed $374.9 million. The total profit for that year was $48.1 million. The final quarter of the year grossed $126,733,000, far over projections, bringing the company annual revenue well ahead of the $325 to $350 million that it had projected for the year. The biggest reason was the success of WrestleMania, which is now up to 885,000 buys, the second biggest pay-per-view in company history. In addition, the company has expanded its overseas business, which is far more profitable. The sale of DVDs has also been a major business increase, as in recent months, they've released the Flair DVD, which sold 114,000 copies, the Monday Night Wars DVD, which sold 118,000 copies, and the WrestleMania DVD, which sold 114,000 copies. I'm telling you, dude, that Flair DVD was everything in 2004.
Really?
Yes, it was the biggest deal. And there were the big three were, for me anyways, were the Flair, the Hogan, and the Michaels DVDs.
Oh,
but the Flair one was the one that everybody wanted because he's the greatest, man. And it had matches from the 70s, 80s that people hadn't seen. Like, there's Flair Steamboat and stuff that there's no YouTube. Do you know what I mean? Like, so unless you had these things on cassette, you weren't going to be able to see them. And so that's why that they made that such a big deal. The Michaels one, I believe, was called From the Vault. And the Hulk one was Hulk Still Rules. And man, did I wear those things out, brother. Oh, I loved those DVDs. So Linda McMahon again tried to talk about the brand split as a few steps back leading to steps forward. Dave says house show results indicate 2 steps back and none forward. Pay-per-view results indicate no steps back at first and now steps back. Ratings haven't fallen as badly as some would have thought, with half of the stars on each show, and Raw has largely held steady. The company is taking major steps to increase ratings, all of which involves less time to the wrestling aspect of the product and more trying to turn aspects of the show into reality programming. So, John, we have 2 shows. We have 2 different angles that we're going on. Would you please tell us the 2 main new weekly storylines that'll be on each show?
The first one, since we're talking about Raw, we'll start with Raw first. Raw is built around the Diva Search. It's the reality TV style with one person voted off each week by the fans. The winner is expected to be put immediately into storylines. And since WWE is paying them over $250,000 for a 1-year contract, like, I remember the Diva Search being a really big deal, and even Vince was there to tout it weekly, and it was a big deal, and they did it for multiple years to come afterwards. On SmackDown, this is where the Diva Search was originally planned for, but it was nixed by UPN. So UPN said no to the Diva Search. Do not put it on our network. Instead, they're going to host a new version of Tough Enough, where the idea will be that a Tough Enough segment on SmackDown every week, taking the place of a wrestling match, leading to 1 or 2 new wrestlers winning, with the idea of springboarding those wrestlers onto SmackDown. And there's some stuff coming up too that we can even talk about that's very relevant later on in the timeline, especially with Kurt Angle, and we can get into that some other time. But yeah, right. 2 main points for the shows.
And it's fascinating because in 2004, I mean, this is the peak of the Survivor, those kinds of shows which leads, and both of us are big VH1 reality show marks, like the dating shows, the Bachelor style, where you have the Rock of Loves, the I Love Moneys, the I Love New Yorks, the Flavor of Loves. All of these have the formula of big cast of characters, and then one's voted off, and the WWE's twist on it is that we're going to have fans vote the person off each week. So they are very much trying to sink their teeth into the trends of the time.
Yes.
So aside from those, another storyline plan is to go along with the presidential elections. So the idea here is to announce an election for the storyline president of Raw and SmackDown. This would be at about the time that Kurt Angle's GM characters finished up, and he's expected to be wrestling soon. We also have Eric Bischoff, who, while he's a great performer, Dave says is still hated by a lot of people internally, and many feel that his role has run its course. So sort of piggyback off of the 04 election with we're going to elect us presidents, quote unquote, of each brand. Another plan is to do quarterly television tapings overseas. And I bolded this because they said this in 04 and it only took them 20 flipping years to do it.
Yep.
The feeling is the overseas crowds are now better reacting than domestic. Please watch Backlash 23. Please watch Backlash 24. Please watch the last show that we just had. Help me out. What was that?
Clash
of the Castle. Overseas, man, they're ravenous, and they recognized this 20 years ago. So this was a decision suggested by WWE stockholders who have seen the growth of international business and weakening of domestic business, and overseas shows are far more profitable. Vince doesn't like it. That's why. That's literally why it doesn't happen.
Probably because Vince doesn't want to go over there.
Well, Vince wants to go over there for the business, but the tours were so short because he wanted them back so that they could tape on Monday.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Or Tuesday. They were taping on Monday and Tuesday at that time.
Yeah.
So that was the deal. And the stockholders like, bruh, like there's money to be made and these people want to see it. So the plan was to do quarterly tapings then.
Wow.
McMahon also talked about doing much more with the tape library over the next year. This McMahon being Linda. She said that several wrestlers from the past have been signed to new talent contracts and would be appearing on WWE 24/7, doing interviews and lead in and lead outs. This is clearly going to be an attempt to market wrestling nostalgia more and more over the next year, including merchandise and, of course, videos than the company's entire prior history combined. And that didn't stop, because I got news for you, dude. Their top selling shirt is probably still Austin 316.
Probably. Or some version of 316, Philly 316.
Own it. It was the one thing I wanted to get. All right, man. So why don't you take us into our next Raw?
Our next Raw is June 21st, 2004, live from Miami. So we get it kicked off with The Rock, his hometown. He does about a 25-minute segment. More things change, the more they stay the same. I guarantee you that one.
You got that right.
He introduces his grandmother, mother, and wife in the front row, as well as some of the Miami Dolphins in attendance. Hey.
Miami is the Dolphins, our favorite football team.
Randy Orton came out and told The Rock that he was yesterday's news. Rock said that his daddy used to beat up Randy's daddy, and that his grandfather used to beat up Randy's grandfather, and that his grandmother used to whip Randy's grandmother.
Dude, The Rock's the greatest. He's the greatest.
So good. The Rock challenged Orton. Orton backed off, but Rock knocked him out of the ring. Bischoff kicked Rock out of the building, which I posted a short of this on the tube. So if you're watching along on YouTube or you're listening to this in podcast version, go check it out. It's a short. The Rock did a few minutes of running commentary as he was leaving. Orton got back up and The Rock did a countdown from the backstage. It was finished with Edge spearing Orton. Regal confronted Bischoff, who then wouldn't allow him at ringside for Eugene's match and reinstated him to wrestle immediately. Regal's opponent was Kane, who destroyed him in seconds. Even before the bell sounded, left him laying. This is a classic move. Bischoff had Kane. Teddy Long had The Undertaker.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The trope, it's the trope before the trope was a trope.
Yes.
You got that right, man. It should be noted that Regal is now officially medically cleared and he's expected to wrestle regularly. So that's why he got so much TV time with Eugene. He was close. Let's get him back on camera. And now he's ready to rock and ready to roll.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense too. Eric Bischoff told Chris Benoit that he would defend against Kane next week on Raw with the World Heavyweight Championship. The winner will defend that title at Vengeance against Triple H. So I guess the Eugene #1 contendership that they made a big deal about the week prior was just nixed, just totally gone.
Yeah. And for more context, because we don't watch Heat before these shows. So on Heat, they said Triple H had to win to get a shot, but left Eugene out of it. And now on this show, they announced Triple H had the shot before the match even started. So,
my word. Randy Orton and Batista beat Edge and Jericho. Batista clotheslined Jericho. Jericho sold it like it was like he was out cold, and the match stopped. Jericho was carried out, but Edge decided to continue. Edge got beat on. He made a comeback. He speared Orton. Batista made the save, and Orton followed that up with an RKO for the pin. Matt Hardy told Stacy Keibler to keep another secret and showed her the ring. Matt came out and asked Lita to marry him, and the crowd was dying. Before Lita could say yes, though, Kane said he was the father, and the crowd is now dead.
That's how you do it. How to kill a crowd. Have a horrible soap opera playing out with Kane involved.
My word. It's not good.
So Dave says the plan for Lita is to keep her out of the ring for 9 months to play the pregnancy angle out to a logical timeline ending.
Wow. So now this is where, so we're going to draw the line at pregnancy where we're going to keep kayfabe alive, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to keep her out of the ring now, even though she wrestled last week, I believe it was.
Bischoff and Triple H pretend to get mad at each other in front of Eugene and then laughed at Eugene once he left. The main event has Triple H and Eugene. They end in a no contest. Triple H started pounding on Eugene after a clean start, but Eugene hulked up. He hit a rock bottom in the people's elbow. Dude, this is so great. I love that he uses that. So good. Flair interfered. Triple H hit a pedigree, and Bischoff came out and said he didn't want Eugene beat, but he wanted him hurt. Triple H got a chair. Benoit did the run-in. Benoit got the chair, and he went to hit Triple H, but he hit Eugene instead, and Triple H hit the pedigree on Benoit to end the show.
This is one of those things that, like, the way that I remember watching the Warrior vomiting on TV, or I remember Shawn losing his smile on TV.
Yeah.
I literally remember Bischoff coming out saying, I don't want him beat. I want him hurt. I don't know why, dude, but that stuck with me.
That one stuck.
So the 621 Raw show may have been a bad wrestling show. These are Dave Meltzer's words, but probably having to do with The Rock, even unadvertised, and the Eugene versus Triple H intrigue. It drew a 4.23 rating. So a 3.97 first hour, 4.45 second hour, and 4.95 million viewers. It was the highest rated Raw since the March 29th Raw that was headlined by the first Triple H and Shelton Benjamin match. Huh. So a W. The thing is that Rock deal, and Dave was screaming in the observers leading up to this, where he was like, advertise this man, please. They did it locally.
Yeah.
But they were like, why are you not telling everybody he's going to be on the show? But I guess because it was in Miami, people assumed it anyways. You know what I'm saying? So house shows, you're going to love this, brother. You're going to love this house show report. In Buffalo, Kane beats Benoit with the crossface in a very good match. Orton beats Edge after Batista knocks Edge off the top rope, and Orton got the pin using his feet on the ropes. Orton was heavily cheered in Buffalo. Eugene comes out with La Resistance, singing and waving the Quebec flag. Rob Conway yells at him. Eugene turns around, and as he does so, knocks out Grenier with the flag. Conway tries to grab the flag from Eugene, but since he's got the Hulk grip strength, he couldn't do it. Bischoff ran down and told Eugene to let go of the flag. He did, and Conway, who was tugging on it as hard as he could, went flying. Bischoff then told Eugene he could wrestle anyone he wanted, so Eugene picked Eric himself. Eugene gave Eric the airplane spin and put Bischoff down. Bischoff immediately bailed and fed Eugene Coachman. Eugene then used the rock bottom people's elbow combination to pin Coach, and then gave Bischoff a stunner to end the show.
Oh my word.
That entire scenario of him, I could picture it all.
Yes.
With the flag, singing the song, hitting Grenier, taking the bump. That's so great, dude. I love it.
It's so good.
So the reason that I outlined specifically Buffalo is the next night they're at MSG. So this is the big MSG show for that time. So MSG is headlined by Benoit over Triple H with the crossface in a match that went more than 30 minutes. They were trying to do Flair versus Steamboat, but Triple H stalled for so long, the crowd got tired of him at one point, and the reports had it in the 2.5 to 3.5 star range, and not nearly the level of their previous house show matches. Flair and Batista were involved in the finish, but Benoit hit both with chairs before putting on the crossface. So that's your MSG main event. Orton again pins Edge using the ropes in the IC title match. Dave says, and this is interesting because MSG's smart. Do you know what I'm saying? So Orton is getting cheered more and more on the road, and it was more evident here. And Edge is getting booed, particularly at the end. Jericho, billed as being from New York City, and then Dave says he was born on Long Island, pinned Batista. Eugene's segment with Bischoff and Coach was identical to Buffalo the previous night. The Eugene segment got over very well. When Howard Finkel announced the next show on the market on 7/31, bless that day, is in East Rutherford, it would feature the SmackDown crew. Fans booed the mention of SmackDown.
Wow.
Yeah, so we got SmackDown heat. So 2 other things before we move on. The first is, the report is while doing the Hollywood thing, Steve Austin is living with DDP in Southern California. DDP and Kimberly Page have recently split up. So sucks to lose the lady, but at least you gained an Austin.
Yeah, you did. You gained a rattlesnake in the first accountability crib.
In the pre-accountability crib. Also, Johnny Nitro is back full-time in OVW, so he has been demoted. John, we have some meat from the July 5th Observer.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we get into it, would you please lead us into our next TV report?
Yes, the June 28th, 2004 Raw. The show opened up with a Triple H promo. He told Eugene to come out, and he was very friendly. He told him Benoit and William Regal were liars, and they were not his friends. He told Eugene he was going to be a member of Evolution, and to much chagrin of the other members, Triple H played this part so well. Again, there's even more stuff on the shorts. Go check out the shorts. Bischoff set up Triple H versus William Regal with Eugene as the ref later in the show. Jericho and Edge beat Orton and Batista when Edge speared Batista and Jericho pinned him after a lion salt. Backstage, Triple H explained to Flair that he was using Eugene and they'd get rid of him after he won the title. Flair said Eugene was ruining their gimmick. Lita was upset because Matt hasn't been returning her phone calls. JR interviewed Kane, and Matt Hardy came out and attacked Kane. He gets in a few shots, but he's pulled off by security. This is actually turned into a somewhat of a hot angle here.
They're doing their best, man. They are. It's the only thing that they are cooking on the undercard because everything else is just all about the main event and Orton and Edge.
Yep. Triple H beat William Regal via DQ in a short match. Flair threw in the brass knuckles to Triple H. Regal got them, but Eugene turned around and saw them, and he DQ'd Regal. Triple H then shoved Regal into Eugene. Eugene was confused, and he attacked Regal. The crowd actually started to turn on Eugene here. That's another short. Go check it out in the archives there. But La Resistance beats Rhino and Sergeant Slaughter. Where did Slaughter come from here?
Who knows, man? Who knows? Dust them off and send them out there. Great ultimate thing.
Ultimate, got it in the collection. Bischoff announced that he'd be gone next week and that Eugene would be the GM, and the fans booed the announcement.
Okay, I got something for this. So Bischoff will be off of Raw next week because he's trying to sell and put together a new reality show called 777 or 777 that his production company, Bischoff Hervey, as in Jason Hervey, who's Kevin's older brother from the Wonder Years Entertainment, are partnering with Scott Sternberg and Rick Hilton, who's Paris Hilton's father, on. So on your bingo card, did you know? I did not know that and that Bischoff Hervey Entertainment's a real company. Like, full Wikipedia page, you should see the shows that they have put out there. Holy cow. But this was their first endeavor, and absolutely are working with Paris Hilton's dad on this. So the premise is that they would take 7 multimillionaires who would put up $1 million in Vegas and compete in a bunch of different gambling encounters, and the winner would get the $7 million pot. They're trying this week to sell it to a network. Bischoff, Hervey, and Rick Hilton have already sold a show to NBC called The Good Life, which will be a reality show starring Kathy Hilton, who's Paris's mother. They're also looking for their 7 multimillionaires who would risk the $1 million as a way to become celebrities on the network prime time. So that's why he's gone.
That's really interesting. Did not know that. But in our main event, Benoit beat Kane with the crossface to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. The steps were that if Kane won in any fashion, pinfall, submission, countout, DQ, he'd get the title. Benoit could only win via submission. Kane attacked Benoit after and chokeslammed him. Lita came out. She seduced Kane and then gave him a low blow. She went for the bell shot, but Kane grabbed her. He put her down so that she didn't lose the baby. Benoit then nailed Kane with the belt, and that's how they went off the air for Raw. What an ending.
What an ending is right. Nothing else to say. So the 628 show drew a 3.67 rating, 3.37 first hour, 3.94 second hour, and 4.62 million viewers. The big gainers on the show were Edge and Jericho versus Evolution Tag, which gained 661,000 viewers over the 17 minutes that it went on. And Triple H versus Regal gained 547,000 after the Kane interview and a Diva Search video lost 318,000 viewers. Yeesh.
Yeah, no wonder they're losing viewership doing that dumb shit.
Well, think about it. Back to back, man. You have a dead soap opera and you have a Diva Search that, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I guess it's the sex sells adage, but like, even then, dude, I was done with it, and I was 19 years old.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know. So for house shows, this was the worst weekend in many years when it came to house show attendance. It was worse for the Raw crew because they were working cities that are vacation towns, so road expenses were higher than expected in business, and thus the money will end up far lower than expected. 7-2 on Raw show in Vancouver drew 1,500 fans, which is horrible for the Raw crew in a city of that size. The 7-3 show in Saskatoon was even worse, with 1,100 fans in attendance. Triple H, Flair, Jericho, Bischoff, and Trish Stratus were all off the tour for that weekend. On the show, Benoit beats Kane with the crossface in a submissions match. Orton is still pinning Edge using the ropes. Orton is getting cheered, and there's Edge sucks chants even in Canada. And William Regal did work the tour. He's on the road beating Stevie Richards. So William Regal's back. And so, John, this leads us to the main story of the Observer this week. And this was a chunk of meat that I was not ready to stick a knife in and start to cut into. So Ric Flair's book comes out, and I am going to read the preface here that Dave has. So the Ric Flair autobiography, To Be the Man, 6 years in the making, was destined to be the most talked about wrestling book of the year under any circumstances, simply because of its subject. Dave does laud Rick as being the greatest to ever do it, with his in-ring work, his interview skills, and he says that only Hogan is close with enduring charisma. Dave also says that the subject of him being the greatest ever is touched upon very little in the book, mostly in the beginning. And the quotes from the book are when he says, quote, "For the last 15 years or so, I've been told I'm the greatest professional wrestler who ever lived," end quote. Dave then says the names he chose to compare himself to as the greatest in wrestling are Frank Gotch, Lou Thez, Bruno Sammartino, Vern Gagne, Gorgeous George, and Hulk Hogan. And it's interesting because they're all wildly different qualifications of being the greatest, which is why anybody's top five always has some weirdo amalgamation of Flair, Hogan, Austin, Rock, and then somebody else's five, right? Like it all depends on what you want. And I'm saying for modern day wrestlers.
Right.
The book is going to be talked about for two different reasons. The first is Flair talking about himself and taking a far more critical look at himself as a person than you'd expect, or that we've seen in almost any wrestling autobiography. You have a 55-year-old man who's led an interesting life, looking back at himself, making no bones about how much fun he's had, and questioning if that was always the right thing. He talks about his excessive drinking and his depression in the 90s from his frustrations about how he was portrayed in WCW. His self-esteem was tied to the business that's not often kind, even to its living legends. He talked in depth about how deeply he was affected by the declining health and ultimately the death of his parents. He second guesses the decisions of his youth, his football prospects dashed by flunking out of school being one of them. And this isn't in the book. Somebody spoke with the coach of the University of Minnesota from that time. I don't know if it was Dave, so I can't give it to him. But the coach had said that Flair had NFL talent and he just flunked out of school. Party boy, didn't care, but he was that good of an athlete.
Wow.
So Dave says he also talks about the positives and negatives of living his wrestling gimmick 24 hours a day, nightly going out, women chasing, etc. But there's a flip side to all that. He talks about not being there for his first family and two oldest children because he was so busy being Ric Flair in the 70s. And it was a regret he learned from, because you can see just how important it is to be there for his two current high school age children, one of which being Ashley. The other one was Reed.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about what he was well known for in the 80s when he'd make $5,000 in a week, spend $10,000, and his trouble with the IRS and his bosses had to bail him out of, and even having his driver's license suspended a few years whenever he was the world champion. He also talks about his profession and his favorite and not so favorite opponents. It is a WWE book, so the story has to have a happy ending. Flair right now is the best of both worlds. He's lost his confidence, and after reading the book, you really understand for the first time why he's always said that he's personally glad of WCW dying, even though he felt sorry in the big picture for all the people that lost their jobs. Thanks to several people running WWE and current running buddy Triple H, who grew up idolizing him, he was given one last chance in 2003 to be the Ric Flair of old, forming Evolution. Now at 55, when all the people who tried to run him off are almost either out of business or out of power, he can get the last laugh because he's still one of the biggest stars in the game. He's not viewed as a guy who won't let go, but rather an honor to work with. Like with all WWE books, you also have in-depth talk about money, what he earned in the Carolinas, his NWA champ, in the WCW years, etc., but not one word about his earnings in his two WWF runs. The other part of the book, which will be far more controversial, is his take on different people. And John, I leave that to you.
For the most part, it's black and white with a few shades of gray. The people he gives nothing but praise to are Wahoo McDaniel, Ray Stevens, Ricky Steamboat, Harley Race, Vince McMahon, Hunter, and Shawn. There are the management people he had falling outs with, who he felt didn't respect who he was. Most notably are Jim Herd and Eric Bischoff. Then there are the wrestlers who over the years he perceived as having taken shots at him that he was delivering a book full of receipts on, that are Scott Steiner, Bret Hart, Mick Foley, Shane Douglas, and with a surprising twist, Hulk Hogan. One of the last sentences of the book was among the most telling. Hulk Hogan could never buy what I have. Dave says, and I quote, Flair recognized that after the last few years within the profession, he, not Hogan, will be thought of by the boys and insiders as the greatest of the modern era, end quote. Flair described Hogan as someone who was motivated very differently, such as his need to beat Ultimate Warrior in 1998, and before that, his grooming Renegade to be the superstar to lay down for him because he wanted people thinking it was Warrior under a new name and he would get his win back. He also says that Hogan was obsessed with the Observer, which is a clever dig because Hulk was known as an Observer hater, and he even burned a copy of it on live TV. Flair's jab was pointed at Hogan being a closet reader to see what was being said about him, and the negativity would really get to him because he was concerned about his legacy after he was gone from the business. Dave talks about Hogan and Flair working together in 1992, and Flair was one of the people who recruited him to WCW in 94. So this is a future show plug. We got you covered here. It's coming up soon, so just be ready for that one. He also says that they worked together many times from 94 to 2000, even drew the company's last 1.0 pay-per-view buy rate in February of 1999, but he says that the real heat from Flair came from Sold Out 99. This was David Flair's debut, and he and Rick were teaming up against Wyndham and Hennig. The post-match was Rick getting handcuffed to the ropes, and Hogan would whip David 4 or 5 times. Instead, he destroyed David with many more whips than that.
The quotes on that one were basically like him saying, and here I am, I'm handcuffed and I just want to go and I want to hold my son and I want to say, stop it. So he took that one really personally, which is crazy because like Hulk is this renowned con man.
Yeah.
And Flair was like, I'm cool with the conning. And then he whipped his kid and he was like,
I'm not cool with the conning.
Right.
Jeez. Other book highlights from The Observer is that he buried Brett for not dropping the belt to Shawn on the way out. He compared Mick Foley to Brutus Beefcake. He notes that his financial frustrations in the late 90s with WCW and his contract was for $500,000 a year, half of what DDP, Goldberg, Nash, and Hall, Bret Hart, Sting, and Hogan were making. But he also earned less than Scott Norton, Booker T, Stevie Ray, Rick Steiner, and others. He detailed his backstage fight with Eric Bischoff after he came to WWE, admitting that it was premeditated, especially after Bischoff made the statement in front of all the wrestlers in a WCW locker room a few years prior about how all the guys needed to realize how lucky they are and that there are only 3 guys on the roster, Hogan, Savage, and Piper, had ever drawn money, and Ric Flair was sitting right there. Basically saying that Flair didn't even draw a dime. It was just those 3 guys alone. And that has been talked about for years.
Yep. And there was the lawsuit from 98. So there was a whole lot of things, I guess, that were leading up to that. And then the famous story with that is that he told Arn that he needed to talk to Bischoff and watch the door. That was what Arn said. Mm-hmm. And, Arn was watching the door while Flair was in there giving Bischoff the business, I guess. We don't know because we weren't there. So Dave says, overall, the accuracy in the book is strong. The book was 6 years in the making after being dropped by WCW after the Goldberg book failed. And then there were contract issues with the rights after Flair signed with WWF. Then there were issues with Mark Madden, who had heat with the company as the editor. Mark Madden ends up getting a lot of praise for editing it afterwards. And then finally, Flair's schedule made it very difficult for him to complete the project. So the book was ghostwritten by Keith Elliott Greenberg, who Dave calls one of the company's best. The timeline of the book runs through Flair winning the tag team title with Batista in December. So it doesn't cover anything in 2004. And again, that book is Ric Flair to Be the Man. I have not read it. I've only read excerpts. And after seeing this, I think I need to.
I was getting ready to say the same thing. I feel like I've got to read this book now.
So other news and notes from this time. The WWE recently had an interview with a well-respected soap opera writing about joining the writing team for a supposed $200,000 per year role, among other things, keeping storyline continuity. It was the role that former movie writer Paul Guay, I believe that is Guay, a lifelong fan who wrote Liar, Liar, held for some time before quitting. The key to this was the writer was not only never a wrestling fan, but had no knowledge whatsoever of the product. And then to follow up in the next week's Observer, Dave writes, the writer, Tom Childress, was offered the job. So not a wrestling fan, no knowledge of the product. Here's your job.
Wow.
They wanted him to move to Stanford, and he has a family. So as of midweek, he had not accepted the offer. One of the things he noted is that previous people in the position haven't had a lot of longevity, one of them being the person that he was replacing.
Okay.
Other notes, Christian is out of action until August at the earliest with back problems. Friends of his say that he's pretty down about it because he thought the injury came at the worst time possible for his career, since his pairing with Trish Stratus looked to have the most potential of anything he's done in a long time. Also, in a local Winnipeg newspaper, former wrestling personality and friend of Chris Jericho, Don Callis, has written that Jericho pushed back against his hometown being changed to New York. It's noted that Edmonton also gave Benoit a much larger hero's welcome than Atlanta gave him. So we're trying to stop this hometown mess and jiggery, but we still got Kenzo. We still got La Resistance. So I guess we got to do what we got to do. All right, John, would you hit us with the Go Home TV report, please?
Yes, this is the July 5th Raw from 2004. The show opens as interim GM Eugene ordered a game of musical chairs. I love this is one of my favorite segments of all time. It had Stacy Keibler, Jerry Lawler, Ric Flair, Jericho, Tyson Tomko, Tajiri, and Coach. The winner gets a title shot. Tajiri blew mist at Coach. Flair was strutting and got eliminated, but not before he shoved Keibler out of the way to eliminate her. The final two were Jericho and Tomko, and Jericho ripped the chair out from Tomko as he went to sit down. After Jericho won, it was announced that he would get an IC title match. The fans booed because they thought they were going to get Benoit and Jericho.
Dude, how much it do you have when you're Ric Flair and you can literally style out during a game of musical chairs?
Dude, he's so
funny in that.
It is that I'm going to post a link to it because it is one of the greatest segments in Raw history. You cannot tell me any different. It is perfect. I don't even care. It beats every single Raw segment you've ever seen in your life. That is the best one. Backstage, Flair talked about how ridiculous it was that a 16-time world champion was on TV playing Ring Around the Rosie, but he played it so well. Triple H told Flair to be calm until he got his title back. Eugene's office was a bouncy house, and Triple H trying to talk business with him in the bouncy house was fantastic. We now have the setup for Flair and Eugene as a tag team.
Dave says the writers should be castrated because it was the guys making a horribly written product into something at times entertaining that had no right to be.
Triple H came out for a promo. Edge interrupted and said that one by one, every member of Evolution was going down. Triple H blew him off, but Edge attacked him. Evolution came out, but Edge punched Orton and ran off. Kane and Batista ended in a no contest after Matt Hardy interfered and attacked Kane. Orton pinned Jericho in a match that went almost 20 minutes, and Dave gave it 3.5 stars. Jericho was actually announced as being from Winnipeg, which was super over. The finish had Jericho putting Orton in the walls. He releases the walls to punch Batista, who's standing on the apron, but that allowed Orton to get him from behind using the ropes and the tights for the pin. The main event was Triple H and Flair and Eugene over Benoit and Edge. Benoit was about to use the chair that Triple H had brought in. Eugene took the chair from Benoit, but he wouldn't hit him with it. Benoit had Triple H in the sharpshooter when Eugene hit Benoit with the chair. Triple H then hits the pedigree and he got the pin.
Dave said, it's amazing when you think back that not many weeks ago about how awesome the show was. Now it's just Triple H and Eugene and ideas totally missing with the audience. So Dave is not a evolution centric show guy, but these are fun. I can't say that they're not fun segments.
They're so fun.
Even looking with today's eyes, man, like they're fun. And that's it. So there's been talk of a Eugene versus Bischoff match on pay-per-view stemming from the good reactions the confrontations are getting at house shows. A Flair versus Eugene program has also been discussed, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Vengeance end with Eugene costing Triple H the match, turning back face since they're teasing the opposite, since the dynamic is better to give Benoit another win and have the title switch at SummerSlam. Raw on 7.5 does a 3.63 rating. 3.37 first hour, 3.86 second hour for 4.48 million views. And so this is the Eugene GM show. And the reason that I'm noting this is the show was flat among teenagers. It was up 26% among men 18 to 34, while among women in that age group, it was up 46%. However, when you get to past men of the age of 35, the show dropped 22% from 3.2 to 2.5. And Dave calls this the musical chairs factor.
Musical chairs draws ratings with the younger audience. What can I say?
Yeah. All right, man. So Raw Report is done. We are into the July 12th Wrestling Observer newsletter. John, would you please give us our update a week later on the Ric Flair book saga?
Yes. So from this Observer, the book To Be the Man by Ric Flair has become the most talked about thing in wrestling over the past week, with both for Flair's own self-portrayal, which even became an issue with his family, and his portrayal of several wrestlers, most notably Mick Foley and Bret Hart. Dave says that the book's ghostwriter, who has been a longtime writer for WWE publications, and the book that he had written was very different, and it was very less controversial than the one that was released. He had tried to either greatly tone it down or completely eliminate all the negative portrayals of Foley and Hart in particular. Mark Madden, he was the book's editor and decided with Flair that the book should be a harder and more opinionated book that got people talking. So Flair and Vince had the final say on what was published. With what was published, McMahon sided more with Mark Madden, looking for buzz and sales. And Dave says the fact that in the acknowledgments at the end of the book, Flair thanked Madden and doesn't say a word about Greenberg, who was the ghostwriter, and that speaks volumes. In the cases of Hart and Foley, they were written receipts for what Flair saw each had written about him in the past. Foley in his book knocked Flair as a booker, and what Hart wrote in his Calgary Sun newspaper column in the 1990s. Flair plainly said when it came to Foley using the term receipt, and the fact that McMahon in the Raw magazine pushed the Foley stuff to get people to buy the book has apparently driven a wedge between Foley and the WWE, although Foley has said nothing publicly at this point about the book. So we're going to focus on Foley only, as this is an ongoing backstage issue throughout the rest of 2004. The line Flair took umbrage with was from Foley's Have a Nice Day, where he said Ric Flair was every bit as bad on the booking side of things as he was great on the wrestling side of it. Foley felt he had contributed far too much to the company to be buried to the level of comparisons with the Ultimate Warrior and Brutus Beefcake.
So Foley was actually in charge of his own storylines after 2000, after the first retirement. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh.
So him putting over Triple H and Orton were stories that he was directly involved with in writing. And it was noted that he turned down stories over the past 4 years that he didn't think were strong enough. Huh. So Foley, he takes very seriously himself, his character, and his contribution to the company. Yeah. I only want to be there to make a difference, right? So this was like a double stab, because Foley knew that McMahon had to approve everything anyways, right?
Yeah.
Flair's comments, quote, Foley has a cult following because of his contributions to hardcore wrestling, but hardcore is such a small part of the history of this business. When I was training, falling off a ladder was not a prerequisite to making it as a professional wrestler. Being fundamentally sound was. Occasionally seeing the inside of a gym was. When I trained under Vern Gagne, we started with 500 free squats, 250 push-ups, 250 sit-ups, and a 2-mile run over farm terrain in sub-zero weather. Then we came back to the barn to be wrestled into submission, cross-faced into submission, stretched into submission. And if Vern didn't like the way things were done, we'd start it all over. He would have looked at Mick Foley on day one after Mick failed to do even one thing Vern required and said, Mick, I don't think so.
Man.
So Ric Flair right here was walking to school uphill 10 miles both ways in a blizzard.
Taking a blowtorch to Foley. My God.
Yep. So he goes on to say that Steamboat, Gagne, Austin, etc. never fell off of ladders. And while Jericho, Angle, and Michaels did, they were respected as athletes first. Go back to quotes from the book. In my estimation, Mick Foley was not a great worker. He couldn't punch. He couldn't kick. In the World Wrestling Federation, he'd spend half the day before television broadcasts sucking up to the writers because he's such a fan of himself. There's a difference between being a great performer and being a guy like Brutus Beefcake or the Ultimate Warrior who became famous because he happened to be working for Vince. It's the same with Foley. When he wasn't working for Vince, there's been no demand for him whatsoever. He's just another guy.
Jeez. So Dave really sticks up for Foley, putting over that it didn't matter what he would have done in Gagne's camp in 1972 because he was someone who would have slept in his car commuting from New York to Pittsburgh to train under Dominic DeNucci and found a way to truly connect with the audience and get himself over. But back to the book, in addition to driving sales, McMahon was also looking to use the comments in a Flair versus Foley feud later in the year. Flair has agreed to do the feud, including a climactic hardcore match. Foley is said to have turned it down specifically due to the comments Flair has made. Some in the company still believe they'll work Royal Rumble and or WrestleMania, while others are most skeptical. Flair did not make the comments to promote a feud, but will absolutely use them in one. And then Meltzer goes on into more detail about all the Bret Hart comments. Savage, who Flair said wasn't a great worker because everything needed to be scripted and he couldn't improvise. He had his star dim when he lost Elizabeth. And plenty of other people Rick both respected and buried. We could really seriously do like 2 or 3 episodes on this book, but this is the immediate fallout of the book. But for now, we got to get you back here, Mongoose, for what else is happening backstage right before we head on into this Vengeance pay-per-view.
Yeah, you got it, man. So Edge has been told by management that he needs a makeover. They've been asking him to cut his hair, but he's been refusing. There's been a feeling that long blonde hair stuff is outdated. And Dave notes, hence the biggest star in the company still has it. Is that a rib? They've told multiple people like Test and Christian, and the new haircut sure changed their careers. Dave says that Christian's rise and the new haircut helps, but that was only due to Jericho including him in his storyline, as without it, he'd probably be buried in the undercard by this point. Edge has always himself joked that his appeal to women was through his hair, and if he cut it off, it would all be gone. They also wanted to change his ring entrance. Triple H was so high on Edge that he got him off of SmackDown specifically to work with him, and they had him beat Kane right out of the chute, but it didn't work. Many have noticed him getting booed in the more hardcore arenas like MSG, and a lot of that is due to people like Orton always being put over and people liking him because they think he's cool. There is a legit problem as fans simply don't buy Edge as a tough guy, and that's been the role he's been trying to play since he came back. Crazy enough, he actually got to play that role 20 years later.
Literally 20 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
Before we move on, ICP has offered Hulk Hogan $15,000 to do one of their shows. When you consider that Hulk Hogan turns down New Japan for the Tokyo Dome at 10 times that, you can assume what his answer was. And the crazy thing with that, and the reason that I included it, I think that was for the Gathering of the Juggalos show that I was at.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so if I could have seen the Hulkster, man.
Oh, man. But Mongoose, the linens are washed, the silverware is wrapped, and the guests are starving. Would you please set the table for the main course tonight and give us Vengeance 2004?
Yes, sir. So WWE Vengeance 2004, July 11th, came to you live from the Hartford Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut. The show drew about 7,000 fans with 6,000 paid and a gate of 370,000. Observer Reader poll results, 60.7% thumbs up, 4.8% thumbs down, and 34.5% thumbs in the middle. Best match poll was Randy Orton and Edge. Second, but receiving less than half of the votes, was Chris Benoit and Triple H. The worst match, as voted by Observer Readers, was Chris Jericho versus Batista. Somehow.
But this is a really big turnaround for a Raw show, considering we got 60% thumbs up and 4% thumbs down, because literally when we talked about Great American Bash last week, it was like 2% thumbs up and 80% thumbs down.
This is true. So Meltzer says the final show of the WWE pay-per-view experiment of 3 events in 6 weeks was a 2-match show built around Chris Benoit versus Triple H for the world title with Eugene in the middle, and Randy Orton versus Edge for the IC title. Early indications are a lower than usual buy rate. Most fans either happy or so-so with the event, and another disappointing live gate. Much of the arena was tarped off, and this was for a pay-per-view event in the company's Northeastern home base featuring its strong crew. The clear thing from this show is, with Evolution dominating everything, combined with a babyface crew that either lacks cool charisma, like Benoit and Edge, or has been positioned as not being tippy-top guys, like Jericho and far more Matt Hardy, Evolution is becoming the big baby faces on the brand. It was evident when probably the biggest babyface reactions on the show were for Ric Flair and Randy Orton, although Flair was put in a babyface position.
That makes a lot of sense because Evolution is so over here. But
yeah,
our first match of the night is The Coach and Garrison Cade versus Tajiri and Rhino. And I'm having a really hard time understanding why they put Garrison Cade with the Coach, because Coach didn't need anyone, and Cade is the drizzling shits. Like, the Coach is so good on his own. Another insane fit by Coach here. This, like, literally the guy is killing it here. I love this match just because it was Coach just surviving to not get misted or gored, but then he ended up eating the pin in the end anyways when he didn't get all of that. After he wiped his brow after getting gored, and he literally turned into the kick from Tajiri, I literally died. That was such good stuff.
That was awesome. That was an awesome spot. Him and the big brow wipe. He did. He sold it awesome. Dave said everyone in this match looked fine except Coachman.
Oh.
But just wait for it. He had more personality out there than all three combined, which is true, man. It is. Tajiri blew the Mystic Cade. Tajiri looked good and made the match 1.5 stars.
Evolution is backstage and they're questioning Hunter on how Eugene fits into their plan. He goes on to tell them that he plans to use Eugene, and then they realize that Eugene is missing and they go to look for him. Hunter turns around the corner and finds Eugene talking to Benoit, who is warning Eugene about Evolution. That leads us into our second match, which is Chris Jericho versus Batista. And I think this is like Batista's big first singles feud. And this makes sense why they put him with somebody like Jericho, who could still work the match. You could really see the potential with Batista. His spine buster and power slam, they're crispy here. Not much everything else, but the crowd was really into Jericho whenever he was on the offense and when he would kick out. But it wasn't enough, though, as Jericho gets Batista bombed. He got his foot on the rope, and the ref never saw it. Batista still gets his win because he ripped the foot off after the count was made.
Yeah, I think that I watched this match, and on first viewing, I didn't notice it. Was it shot so that you couldn't see his foot on the rope first? And then they did the replay and you could see it?
Yeah, the way that Batista was like kind of covering the leg, and then like the ref was behind Batista, so he couldn't see through Batista to see that the leg was on the rope, but he could see Jericho's shoulders on the mat.
Yeah, but I mean the initial pin, the angle that the crowd saw. Were you able to see his foot on the rope right at the beginning?
Yeah, because they shot.
Oh, okay.
They shot it right over the ref's head, where you can really see over Batista's back.
Gotcha. I must have just missed that because in real time I missed it, and then I thought that it was like this clever. Now, if this was 2024's production crew, they would have had that cleverly shot so you didn't see it,
right?
And then they would have showed us the other angle. Okay, Gotcha. So Batista, Dave says Batista looked the worst that he's looked in a long time. He was even worse than Tomko. 1 star.
His power moves are much more crisper than what Tomko's are. That's all I got to say about that.
Dude, I'm not kidding. I watched this match. It wasn't good, but I didn't think that it was. I didn't think that it was the worst thing I ever saw.
Right. So we go back to Evolution in their locker room when Eugene walks in and he's really upset. Hunter continues to manipulate Eugene and calling Benoit a liar, and that together they're going to end Chris Benoit tonight. Hunter says that Evolution has a huge surprise for Eugene, and Flair brings in a robe for Eugene to wear to the ring. This was so good. Our third match is then La Resistance versus Ric Flair and Eugene for the Raw Tag Team Championships. Eugene comes to the ring with Flair, and he mocks everything that Flair's doing. And I wrote, I hope that this is how Sandow got his gimmick. I hope he got it from Eugene. Nothing would have made me happier than Eugene winning the belt here. When Flair got in and he did his entire shtick right after Eugene mocked him, it was so good. Flair, again, played this role so good, and it just felt like he was out there forever, though. Eugene eventually snaps. He interferes without tagging in. He pushes the ref down, and the match is ended on a disqualification, and I was devastated when this happened. I wanted them to win the belt so badly.
It was absolutely set up for them to do it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It really was. Yeah, and you think about it, if I wonder if that wasn't in with real internet, if they wouldn't have done it.
That's, you know what? That's a good call.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because think about the traction, and it's so weird to say this out loud, but like think about the traction that would get on social media. You know what I'm saying? Like people would have went nuts. So you also could have never done Eugene as a gimmick in 2024. So I guess this is all just, parallel timelines or whatever.
That's true. That's true.
Dave says, not much for wrestling, but it had its moments of campy entertainment. I thought that Eugene was hilarious.
That was excellent.
Yeah. Flair and Eugene worked as baby faces, even though they had teased that they wouldn't get along. There were no signs of it during the match, other than Flair being pissed because Eugene did all of his high spots. Flair was probably the most popular wrestler on the show, star in 3/4. Should note that the crowd heavily booed the promotional package of the Hardy Kane Lita soap opera.
Yes, that is our next match here. Kane versus Matt Hardy. Kane beat the absolute tar out of Matt early, and it felt like it was way too long. The match didn't turn around for Matt until Kane got tied up in the ropes. Matt hit Kane with the ring bell and then the leg drop from the top rope. Kane reversed the twist of fate, and this is why I hate the twist of fate, dude. It is literally countered 900 times in every match. It doesn't matter what Hardy match it is. If they're doing a twist of fate, it's getting reversed. Like everyone automatically gets 10 reversals on a twist of fate. Kane gave Matt a hellacious chokeslam, but he wouldn't go for the cover. Lita ran in to stop Kane when he brought the steps into the ring. Kane turned with the steps up at his head, and Kane hit him with a chair, and it covered him for the pin. It wasn't good. I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, Dave says Hardy had to win because nobody believed in him a lick. They worked how they should have, but considering how much time they've spent on this angle, it had little heat. And Dave Meltzer gives this match 2.25 stars.
I wish that they would have done a better finish than that. Like, I feel like there's a way more creative way. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not going to go on the fly here.
The problem is that you have a guy that you have booked as an absolute monster.
Yeah.
Facing an absolute underneath guy.
That is true.
And so the underneath guy has to beat him. And the problem is that if you put him over clean, that means you have to push Matt Hardy. And they're not going to do that.
No, not at that time.
So, you know what I'm saying? So that's me. That's my 30-second dissection of how they got there is that they didn't want to push Matt Hardy to the moon. And so you got that.
Lita follows Matt backstage, and Matt doesn't want her to be out there in the ring for the safety of the baby. So again, like even Matt sees that she shouldn't be out there for a match, but they're going to take her off TV for 9 months.
Not off TV, just out of the ring.
Just out of the ring. Okay, fair enough.
Just out of the ring. We need her on TV.
So our next match is Edge versus Randy Orton for the Intercontinental Championship. The match started with the "Let's Go Orton" chants. Orton is definitely way more over than Edge here. They got into some long chin locks throughout the match. Really cool looking drop kick that Edge gave to Orton coming off the top rope. Orton took off the turnbuckle cover. He stun gunned Edge into the exposed turnbuckle, but Edge kicked out. Orton went for the RKO, but it was countered by Edge pushing Orton into the exposed turnbuckle, and that gave Edge the opening to hit the spear. There was a big crowd reaction for the title change in a good match, but it could have used a little less downtime, I felt. But Orton was in complete disbelief in the ring post-match.
So Dave says, I thought this was an excellent match, with Orton showing the most poise and star charisma I've seen from him. Orton did a long cranking chin lock. To some, it was a never-ending rest hold, John. To others, it was working the neck using a unique angle.
Well, I didn't think about working the neck there because of Edge's neck troubles. Okay, all right.
Yeah, look at old Dave sprinkling some context out here.
For real.
The timing of the spots was perfect. They got up and did one near fall after another, playing off of all of Orton's previous cheating wins, and the crowd heat at the finish was excellent. Place was popping huge for the near falls, 4 1/4 star. So Dave loved this one.
Dave loved it.
He goes on to say, Orton, like The Rock in 1998, was heavily cheered the night that he lost the title. The idea is to get him credibility with win after win, since they're grooming him for a major program with Triple H, probably at WrestleMania. And, as talked about many times, the fans don't buy into Edge's current character at the level that he's being pushed. Again, he's also being groomed for Triple H, which is why characters on Raw, like Chris Benoit, get more focused build-ups instead of the, quote, give up in a few weeks and when it doesn't click immediately, end quote, shtick that has become a company trademark.
Wow. That makes a lot
so
of
Dave,
sense, that they did that for years to come.
Yes, they did. And so Dave says the writing's on the wall.
We go right into our next match for the number one contender of the women's championship. We got Molly Holly versus Victoria, and Molly Holly wearing this chin strap on the wig was incredible. That'll
get me every time, dude. It was just like Angle when Angle shaved his head and wore the headgear with the actual hairpiece on it.
Yes.
Every time that'll get me.
Yes. So if you remember back to the WrestleMania 20 show, she had her head shaved. This was clearly a let-up spot before the main event. Molly and Victoria, they do work really well together, but it just sucks that they really didn't take anyone seriously in the women's division at this time.
And Dave said the winner would be next in line for a title shot at the injured Trish Stratus, possibly at SummerSlam. They had no chance whatsoever because of the previous match and just being that spot on the card. They probably couldn't have done much better, as Molly always works well and Victoria looked great. 2.5 stars.
Yep, and Victoria got the win there in that match. They need to kill that gimmick, that Naomi gimmick they got on her.
Dude, Dave called it like the jiggle salt or something.
Bad.
It ain't good.
So we're here at the main event. It is Triple H versus Chris Benoit for the World Heavyweight Championship, and the video package for this was awesome. It was so good. I have noted here that you can really start to see the effects of Triple H's groin injury from the previous year that was lingering still. He was unable to work out, but he was still able to work matches, and he was starting to put on the weight here. But Benoit's flying headbutt is so spectacular, but at the same time, so scary. Hunter went right in on Benoit's mistake, and he worked the upper body. Benoit got the sharpshooter on Hunter, and the crowd got up really big for this, but Hunter was able to get out of it. Benoit fully yeeted himself with that tope suicida right into the barricade. My word, brother didn't care. He just throwing himself around out there. The ref was knocked out of the ring, and Hunter waved at the stage for Eugene to come down. Eugene does come out. Benoit got Hunter in a crossface, but a confused Eugene stood ringside. Benoit called for Eugene to get the ref as Hunter was tapping out. Benoit, frustrated with Eugene, he got up and then hit Eugene off of the apron. Hunter then hit Benoit with the pedigree as Eugene was getting the ref. Benoit kicked out at the very last second. This was so good right here. That kick out the crowd exploded for that one. Eugene got a chair for Hunter, but he wouldn't let him use it. Benoit took out a interfering Batista and Flair with the chair as they hit the ring to help Hunter. Benoit low-blowed Hunter, and both are laid out with Eugene standing over both of them with the chair, teasing what he was going to do, if he was going to either hit Hunter or if he was going to hit Benoit. Benoit and Eugene got into a tug of war with the chair, but Hunter got hit with it when Benoit lost his grip and Eugene turned with it. The crowd exploded when the chair hit Hunter. Eugene was so upset at this. Benoit rolled up Hunter to retain in an extremely fun main event. The ending to this, the tug of war, the swing of the chair. This was just, oh, it was just so good. It was so good.
Dave says this is a good main event, but between an overbooked finish and too much Eugene, it was, if anything, a slight disappointment. So here he comes to pee on your excitement. Because Eugene got over so big the first time, The Rock did an angle with him. They fooled themselves into thinking he's super over. But his response in recent weeks has been lukewarm, and he and Triple H have become the focal point for the entire brand on television, even though he's a prelim act on the road. With Triple H portrayed as the guy running the show with the plan, who outsmarts the babyface at every turn, even though it didn't work this time, he, meaning Triple H, is about to become the most popular star on the brand. He gives this 3 3/4 stars.
I mean, that's kind of hard to argue, but Triple H has been the star of the brand for the last couple years. So, I mean, I don't understand why he's going to become the most popular star on the brand.
I think he means big babyface guy.
Okay. That makes This is because he's been heel for so long.
Cool heel. Because it was just cool heel. Like that's it. Orton is so over because Orton's cool. Orton's a bad guy, cheats all the time, but he wins and he's cool. And so that's why Orton's getting cheered. And Dave is thinking that Triple H is booking himself into like NWO. You know what I'm saying? Like bad guy, that's the good guy. That's what I'm picking up anyways whenever I read that. The thing about this is, if I'm going to give it context, having read like 30 observers from that year already, I mean, probably not 30, but feels like it. Those Raws, especially from April, late March through April into May, were just mega wrestling shows.
Yeah.
Like just 4-star matches. You know what I mean? Great main events. And it was booked around Benoit, Michaels, and Triple H. So you had wrestlers. And I think that what Dave's doing here is boo-boo facing, because it went from wrestling to sports entertainment.
Yeah, and that's
what I think.
And that makes sense too, because they are losing Michaels and all that. So like all of that makes sense. And some of the other shows we got here coming up on the show. So next week we are going off of everything that we kind of been doing here recently on the show. We've been sticking with 99 and 2004, but there really isn't a lot going on in the fallout of Vengeance. There's nothing going on in the fallout really of Great American Bash of note. So, and there's really nothing going on in 99 either that we haven't already covered. We have AEW Fight for the Fallen 2019, where that is coming next week on the show. We're following that up with WCW Bash at the Beach 1994. And then at the end of the month, we're going back to 99 with WWF Fully Loaded 99. And then we're going into the August, and August is jam-packed. We got Chris Jericho's debut. We got SummerSlam 04, SummerSlam 99, and a ton of other stuff that is happening throughout wrestling around those times. So, and also not to mention that we got Eddie Guerrero bonus show coming later this month here in July. And then we got the Scott Hall bonus show coming in August as well. We got a ton of jam-packed content here for you. So keep subscribing and listening. And a huge thank you to Teddy Mongoose here, because he gave us amazing notes today, as he always does. I can't wait for next week, as we're going to take a dive into AEW Fight for the Fallen. And with that, we will see you next time on the Podski.